Hi, this is Ramirez for Raven Studios. Today we're designing a classic house bass in XFer Serum 2, the kind of warm, groovy low end you'd hear in a lot of early house music. Head over to the Raven Studios where I'll show you how to mix the bass, including the kick and bass interaction for a tight, powerful low end. Let's get started. Okay, so before we get into it, let me give you a snippet of the track I've been working on. It's sort of like a late 80s, sort of early 90s classic house kind of sound. And as such, it's got the bass line that goes with it. This kind of music is what I grew up listening to. It's how I got into house music in the first place. Very sort of Chicago house almost. And it's got that kind of vibe. So I'm just going to give you a snippet of it, just the bass line, and then I'm going to bring in some chords and things so you can hear what we're working on and the context of which we are making the bass for. So this is the track. I've got some chords here that go with it as well. Cool, so that's the track. Okay, let me play the bass line on its own for you. This is the sound here. Very classic, sort of old school house sound. Now, this sound is actually quite versatile. You can use it for a lot of different things. I find that it works well in this kind of style because it's quite a staccato sound. It's quite punchy. So let's get into designing it. Now, we're not going to show you how to make the bass line itself. It's more the sound design. The bass line itself, how to make these kind of bass lines, will come in future videos. But for now, let's just make the sound. I'm just going to duplicate this here like so. I'm going to take off all of these plugins. Now, these plugins that are on here, I'll show you how to mix the bass to get the most out of the sound on the Raven Studio. So head over there if you want to see the full breakdown of how I do that. For now, let's just work on the sound design. Now, I am going to open up Serum. I'm going to go here and just initialize the sound. You go here, we're going to go initialize preset like so, and it gives you a default sound, which is a sawtooth bass. Now, let me just go and solo this one here now. So we're going to solo this. So that's the bass line. If we look at the bass line, let's just take a quick look at it, and you can see it's a really simple dude. You know, it's really easy kind of bass, and it's in the key of, this instance, it's in the key of E Dorian, believe it or not. Let's put it into E Dorian. You can see there, look, if we fold the scale, that's the key. Okay, so it's really quite a simple bass line. It just sort of works over a period of a one bar loop. Do, 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 do. Quite simple. Again, I'll show you how to make the bass line itself in a future video. For now, this is the sound design. So I've just copied the bass pattern. Let's now go back to Serum again. We can start here. Now, as I said, it starts with a default sound of a square sawtooth wave. We're going to change that to a square wave. Now, we've got here Serum 2 just gives you the classic default shapes, and you can just change the wave shape like this. That's the sine wave, that's a triangle. This one is the square wave, which is what we want. And it sounds very different. If you look at it on an oscilloscope or on a spectrum analyzer, it's got a lot of different frequencies. It's got the uneven harmonics. A sawtooth wave has got even harmonics. This has got uneven. And as such, it sounds quite hollow. You'll hear. Compared to the sawtooth, which is this one. Now, of course, that's way too buzzy. We also want to set the octave. So let's try doing that. Is the octave correct? We want to get the bass in there. And if you remember from a future video, if I open up the Pro 4 here, like so, if I set this to default, the default setting like this, I want to make sure that I'm covering frequencies below 60 Hertz. If I hit this piano roll here, let's get the 60 Hertz there. Put that on. Take the kick drum off like that. So no input there. Look, the fundamental is above the 60 Hertz. So let's bring that down by 1 octave and see if that makes a difference. Look, that's exactly what we need from that. We need to cover make sure that we've got some bass frequencies in there. Now, because it's a very harmonically rich sound, you've also got all of the extra harmonics going along the frequency range. In this instance, these are uneven harmonics because it's a square wave, okay? So that's the first thing you want to check. Make sure that you're covering those sub-bass frequencies and the frequencies up to 300 hertz, okay? So that gives you the sub, and then it gives you the sort of mid-range bass as well. It's a very mid-range bass focused sound, so we need all of those harmonics in it to start with. Okay, why do I say to start with? Well, the next thing we're going to use is a filter. I'm going to activate this filter here. Now, the default filter is the MG Low 12, so I'm going to change this to MG Low 24. This is the Moog filter. MG stands for Moog or Moog. Let's not get into a fight about it. We're going to call it Moog. Brits call it Moog. All right, get over it. I know we do sort of have this Moog ongoing thing. I just like to continue that one. Right, so the filter, great. So how do we set the filter up? Well, I'm going to add a little bit of resonance, and look at what resonance does there. Can you see how as I bring in resonance, let me make this like as big as I can. As I bring in the resonance, you can see that the actual bass end of it starts to lower. How do we deal with that? Well, what we do then is bring drive in, and the drive will increase that low end. Also the fatness as well, that brings that back up. So that's a really nice feature within the filter itself, is that when it compensates for the lack of bass on a Moog synthesizer, I've got numerous ones, there's one behind me, you can't see it here, it's got the classic, as you add resonance to the filter, it lowers the bass. It's the classic sort of Moog way of doing it. So they've compensated it. Steve Duda has compensated for that by adding in the drive and the fat, so that sort of brings that back in. But if you do want it to be very classic Moog focused, leave those off. But look, it lowers the bass, it lowers the frequencies below the cutoff. So let's add that back in, and let's add some fatness. Still not sounding anything like it, is it? So let's bring down. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring the cutoff frequency down to its resting place. Now, what do I mean by resting place? Well, resting place is where it finally settles once I've added the modulation. Like a sub. Let's bring that into the track and just see if that fits. And there's another one there. So that's handling the sub end. Okay, so we've got that going on, right? Now, what we want to do now, if I solo this again, apologies, I had the other bass in there at the time, is now I want to look at the envelope, because you can hear that it clicks. If you listen closely, there's a click. So how do we get around that? Well, we just open the release just a little bit, because the release is so quick, it's just sort of snapping off and making a click sound. So if you open up just a bit. Now, the release is the time it takes for the note to disappear once you take your finger off the keyboard. Once the MIDI note is not triggered anymore. How long it takes to release. Okay, now a long release. Now, we can have a long release, but what you would want to do then is make sure that the sound is mono. You don't want the sound to overlap each other. You want each note to cut each other off. So that's the next thing to do, is to turn it to mono like that. But we don't want it that long. I still want to keep that sort of snappy staccato sound. Whilst removing the click. Now, the envelope here, this is generally hardwired to the amp, the volume, okay? We've got 3 more envelopes here, and we're going to use the second envelope to create what you call modulation. Now, what we're going to do here is, what I want to do is to create a sound that opens the filter. Every time the note hits, it opens the filter very quickly. Okay, so it does this. I'm going to attempt to do it. I can't do it quick enough, right? So therefore, I'm going to need some help. How do I get the filter to open just a little bit every time? Well, first thing you need to do is set its resting place. That's a really good I mean, that's a great sub sound anyway. And it just goes to show that square wave is great for bass sounds. It really works in a sort of hollow sound, and it kind of really stands out in the mix. So a square wave is good. Now, set that release, make sure you've got that there. The next thing we're going to use is the envelope 2. And in Serum, what you do is you drag this over to here and watch what happens. It puts in a modulation. Now, this blue line is the time it takes, or how much it opens the filter by every time you hit a note, right? Based on the shape of this envelope here. So if I do this, right, watch what happens. It will open the filter based on the shape of this, and you can modulate it, or you can move this around. That's how long it takes for it to go from the top at maximum volume all the way down to its resting place. That's the decay. We're getting somewhere. Now, the next thing to do is obviously to reduce this. We don't want this to open quite as much. And this little blue icon here, you can then grab it and bring that down. So it only opens it by a little bit. Well, you can change the amount by which it opens the filter every time the note hits. So let's bring that down. Look at that, and you've got that beautiful sort of graphical representation of actually what it's doing. You've got it. There's your sound. Okay. Now, this is what takes a bit of messing with here. It's the sort of envelope of it. Now, if you wanted to sustain it, that's like opening the filter. Okay. The hold would be. And the attack can sometimes create like almost like a trumpet, like kind of slow attack sound. You can go. That womp sound, but in this instance we want it just a little bit. Now resonance comes into play here. Resonance is the sort of, what it does, it sets a peak at the cutoff frequency, and you'll note as I bring up the resonance, not only does it get lower in bass, but you get this peak here. You get that acidic sound. It's almost like a, you know, it's really having a very resonant peak there, and you can do it with an EQ, and then you mess with the cutoff. So let's listen to the track and see how much of that we want. Let's bring it in. Let's take it out of solo and listen to that. No resonance. It needs resonance, doesn't it? It needs resonance to be able to create that peak that cuts through the mix. Awesome. Now, there are, of course, some more parameters that we can mess with here. Do we want to go unison? Like, if you bring in the unison there, first thing you'll note, if you do two notes there, it spreads them out either side, so it gets very stereo, and it's going to be very detuned because of the amount of detune. Let's check that out. Let's do this in solo so we can hear. Now, do we want this? Now, I don't think we do, because bass, I believe, benefits from being, if you've got the panorama like that, that's far left, that's far right. Bass benefits from being in the middle. Now, as the frequencies go up, you can go up like full frequency. As the frequencies go up, you can start to pan it out either side, okay, a little bit further. But generally, the bass, I believe, up to about 100 hertz, 100 hertz, should be mono. And there's a number of reasons for that, and that's because club systems are generally, if you think about it, you've got a massive, great big sub speaker, and then you've got stereo top end speakers. Now, the sub speaker is usually one big speaker. It's a mono sub. And as such, I believe that the bass should be sort of designed to sit within that mono sub there. Hence why when we do a mix, we often take out all the stereo information up to about 90 hertz, and that's to compensate for the club system, so you get that tight bass. So with all of that said, let's think about this. We don't want it in unison. Let's keep the unison off. Right, now what else can we do to that to make this interesting? Well, we can add in a second oscillator. We've got the choice of adding 3 more if we want to. We've got the sub, we've got the 2 oscillators. Let's add in this oscillator here. Now, what you'll note is that in Serum 2, this does not go through the filter. These are the oscillators, A, B, C, and sub, and then noise. You've got to add them in, otherwise you get this. So let's put it through the same filter. Do we want to bring that down in octave? Okay, so it's thickening it up a bit. Note I've got a sawtooth wave. Now what we can do is we can make the bass stereo. If we then add in this unison amount, we've got the 1 square bass in mono, and then we've got the stereo bass from there. Get that. So that's kind of cool. So we've stereoized the bass. Now we can bring in the level of that. Can we change that to a square wave? Let me just see what happens. Often when you have 2 square waves together, you can get phasing. You can get an interesting phase going on. And you can hear it. It's kind of coming in and out of phase with each other. So by having a sawtooth wave, the sawtooth wave enables you to have a different sound that sort of sits in the sides like that. Okay, nice. I'm really enjoying that. That's really nice. Very simple. So we got a recap. Envelope 1 is the amplitude, the volume. Envelope 2, in this instance, I'm using to control the filter cutoff. I've got both oscillators going through the same filter. Okay, and you know, creating that shape. It's going through a Moog filter. You can try out different filters. There's all sorts. There's hundreds of them. S2 filters, Wasp filter, DJ. Look at all these. We've got all these different ones. Moog ladder filter. That's like a more sort of a different model of filters. Wasp. Great. So, but I'll stick with the normal Moog low 24. By all means, try out the different flavors, but you want a low pass filter generally for this kind of sound. What low pass means, it lets the low through and it filters away the high. Often gets confusing because high pass, low pass, people think, oh, well, what? Anyway, you want a low pass filter. Now, the next thing that we can look at is we can use what you call FM, frequency modulation. What does frequency modulation mean? Well, it means that you're using one oscillator as the carrier and the other oscillator as the modulator. What does that mean? Well, it means that you're modulating the oscillator 1 with oscillator 2, okay? So if I go down here and say FM, I'm going to go FMB, look at that. So I'm using this oscillator to modulate this, right? And then if you bring in if you bring in the amount, listen to how it changes the timbre of the sound. You get that very sort of metallic, almost donk sound. Now, we can modulate that with the same envelope. Watch this. If I add this to the envelope there, but then I bring down the amount. So you're getting that sort of knocky modulation. Let's bring this up a little bit and then bring this down. That's nice. It's giving you this sort of attack, this FM modulated attack to the beginning, which will help the sound cut through. It's like a thump. Right, and then finally, what I like to do as well is look at these macros here. These macros can control multiple parameters at one time. That's what a macro is. One knob can control hundreds of parameters in one go. So what can we do with that? Well, we can then first assign this to the cutoff, right? That's the amount by which, by turning the knob, it will... can also then assign that to the release of the envelope here. Let's do that. So the note becomes longer. Let's do that a little bit. Not too far. Let's see how far we can go. Now these things are really great to be able to automate within in your song. As the song progresses, you can have sections where you just automate that. Now remember, you can modulate all sorts of things with this. Let's modulate the FM amount like that, and let's just do it a small amount. Man, I'm not keen on that one. If you want to get rid of it, just click it and go mod source envelope. Well, you can actually go to the matrix here and turn these off. So macro 1 is going to A warp. Let's turn that off there. You can just bring it down. Oh, sorry. I went too far with my mouse. Let's listen to that in the mix. Now, I do want to bring in some kind of sidechain here. Although, let's just leave the sidechain off for now. I'll bring that down there. Let's have a listen in the track. And then let's play around with the envelope to get that to work in the track. Nice, I really like that FM amount there. Now, of course, you can go a lot further with this, and I will be doing a series of these kind of videos, how you can design these sort of classic sounds. And, you know, you can use things like effects, you can use compression on there, you can add some delay if you want to, you can EQ it, you can sort of chorus it if you want to, but I'm not going to do that. Because what I want to do is I want to encourage you to go over to the Raven website, where you can check out how I mix this using external effects, not the effects that are inbuilt into Serum itself, how I use external effects to mix it. All right, I hope you got something from that. It's a very specific sound, but I find that knowing this kind of synthesis can lead you to so many different sounds. And look how simple it is. If I wasn't explaining this, I could knock one of those sounds up in no time at all. Just understanding how modulation works, how filters, what type of filters you want to use, what kind of waveforms you want to use, gives you 90% of the information you need to create the sounds that you want. All right, let me know in the comments if there are any tips that you've got for designing these sort of classic house-based sounds. I'd love to hear. We're all learning from this together. And don't forget to give me a like and subscribe. See you in the next one.